What makes a map in Dead by Daylight good? Could it be reliable loops that are usable for the survivor, yet not ludicrously strong? Could it be dead zones that give the killer a chance to close in if they play correctly? What about a main building that is unique and adds a bit of spice to the map that makes it play differently than others? When I think of good maps, I think of maps like Coal Tower, the Dead Dog Saloon, Toba Landing, and Father Campbell's Chapel. These are just some maps that I thought of the top of my head. But on the other side of the coin, what makes a map bad in Dead by Daylight? Tiles that are connected with little to no thought, so loops can be made longer than they should be, causing players of less than average skill to be able to run an exceptionally dedicated killer for longer than they should be able to. Granted, this is taking advantage of the killer's lack of game sense to know that they should drop the chase and find a new survivor. However though, if every survivor can run to that same loop that is strong, every chase, then what does the killer gain from chasing there? Now I understand that's an extremely unique scenario, but nonetheless, with how many matches of Dead by Daylight that are played daily, as well as the rising player skill floor, the scenario becomes more and more likely. Now you may be asking yourself then, what is the worst map in the game? Well, very briefly, I'm going to discuss some maps that I could consider the worst map in the game, but I wouldn't. A lot of people would point to maps like the Garden of Joy and Eyrie of Crows. Both of these maps, historically, have had very exploitable main buildings, and quite frankly still do, especially Garden of Joy. Others would point to the mindless gameplay of the Gideon Meat Plant and Leary's Memorial Institute, where survivors can mindlessly run from pallet to pallet or window to window. However, I would argue that none of these examples are quite as bad as this map I'd like to talk about. In fact, I would say this map has all these issues and some more. So without further ado, I would personally argue that by far the worst map in this game is the Bad on Preschool. Most older players I would say know this, but if you're curious as to why this map is the worst, by far, allow me to run this down by introducing you to the map's infamous tiles. Introducing first, we have the two-story house. This is exclusive to the Bad on Preschool. This tile has multiple open windows downstairs with breakable walls next to them, while upstairs there are two windows that give the survivors a substantial distance advantage in chase if used correctly. There is also a very safe pallet upstairs that the killer is forced to break if they do not want to be stuck in this building. On one side of the pallet, the survivor has access to a window. On the other side of the pallet, the survivor has access to the other window, as well as a hole that drops down next to another window by a breakable wall. While this building is incredibly strong, quite frankly, we're just scratching the surface when it comes to the strength of the tiles on this map. This is nothing compared to... Historically, this building was called the House of Pain. It used to spawn on Haddonfield as well as Badham, however, after Haddonfield's first update, the building was severely nerfed. We weren't given quite that same luxury here on Badham. This version of the House of Pain that spawned in this match you're seeing in the background isn't the strongest version of it, however it is incredibly strong still. With windows that connect to a very safe pallet, this tile is even stronger against a 4.4 movement speed killer, especially. Before the nerf of Balanced Landing, this tile was essentially infinite if the killer did not smarten up and drop chase. Quite frankly, this tile alone is strong enough to be a main building. However, believe it or not, we still have not reached the peak of the tile strength of this map. The House of Pain was the bane of a killer's existence a few years back, and somehow, still today, it lives up to the title given to it by us old-school killer players. The Killer Shack is one of the most iconic and beloved tiles in Dead by Daylight, but on Badham it's one of the weakest tiles on the map. Just want to put that into perspective so you can see just what we have coming up. The only thing you can really work with here is the shack itself and a few connectors, but it is nothing in comparison to... Well, we're finally at the end. I would say we've covered the good, the bad, and the ugly, but quite frankly, there is no good on this map. So now that we've reached the end, the preschool itself. Will killers finally be given a break on this map? Will killers finally have an area that they can protect the gens near? Absolutely not. Let's start with the front of the school. Survivors have a somewhat unsafe pallet next to a hook and a car. This pallet is not exceptionally good if the killer plays it correctly. Then, next to that, we have the one thing that makes this loop so unbelievably ridiculous. And here it is. This window in the front of the school. It has been infamous for years. In the original version of Badham, the fence next to the window is much longer, giving the killer much less of a chance to catch you. Now, a bit of a disclaimer, if the killer is already close to you, then the window is not strong. However, if you have some distance, the killer cannot catch up quickly enough to stop you. Vaulting the window itself slows the killer down quite a bit, so as the killer, you need to take a wider path to catch the survivor. Consider this window the setup to what makes this tile so incredibly ridiculous. You can chain this window into so many things, so let's cover just some of the survivors' options. We have a tile at the back of the school, which is very similar to the car loop in the front. Survivors can waste a bit of time here before making their way into the school. Behind the school itself is the weakest pallet in the entire area. It's extremely unsafe to the point where if the survivor does not get this done, it is almost certainly a hit. Inside the school, this is the first of 4 pallets spawn. A pallet can spawn in this area, though in this match it did not. This pallet is very strong and technically can be mind gamed, but it is more luck than anything. We also have this pallet, which is completely safe. Killers used to be able to swing over the gap in the floor for a cheeky hit, but that has either been removed or made extremely difficult to do so. Once you go downstairs, there is a window vault and a potential basement spawn. This window vault gives survivors a chance to use a lithe. Right here is the potential basement spawn. If the basement does not spawn here, a cheeky survivor can run down here and make themselves almost unhookable if the killer is not smart enough to notice this and break a wall to get the survivor out into the open courtyard. This is not everything though, because right here we have the first of 2 downstairs pallet spawns. This is an extremely safe one. This narrow corridor pretty much cannot be mind gamed, leaving the killer no choice but to break this pallet. Since the pallet did not spawn on this side, that means it is guaranteed to spawn on this side. This pallet here is extremely safe, but it's not as safe as the other pallet. This is a bit more mind game friendly because it has less visibility for the survivor. However, the survivor, quite frankly, would have to make a huge mistake to mess this pallet up. Now that we've covered all the pallet spawns and the strong window, I would like to briefly turn my attention to the breakable walls that can spawn in the school. If you are feeling a bit confident and decide to chase in the preschool, you can make things even worse for yourself by making the mistake of breaking this one wall. And it's the wall you're looking at right now. Let's just take a look real quick at the wall and its proximity to the rest of the stronger parts of the map. Now that we've broken this wall, what you see is that survivors get quicker access to the safe pallets inside the school, as well as a faster loop around the school. This is just the Dummy's Guide to Bad in Preschool, showing the strength of the tiles that players can very easily chain together. All of this, as well as the connecting tiles between them, makes Badham Preschool an incredibly survivor-sided map. And that just poses another question. Does a map being survivor-sided make it a bad map? Well, no, not at all. Same could be said for killers, but when a map leans so far one direction, that causes a huge issue. Examples of this are Midwich and, of course, Badham Preschool. These 2 maps lean so far one way that the map's balance is laughable. The idea of balancing these maps in their current states by adding such minuscule changes to them is a joke. Badham is the poster child of this. This map has been reworked multiple times since its release, and it's still terrible. There are multiple variants of the map, and each of them is worse than the last. Maps being sided towards killer or survivor is completely fine. Nobody complains about Dead Dog Saloon, and quite frankly, it's a cakewalk for a killer that ignores the saloon. But when an entire map is this strong towards one side, in this case survivor, then it is an issue. Map offerings are brought to abuse it, small YouTubers spend their lives making videos about how bad it is, and behavior just lets the map sit for years, untouched, festering, much like the license it comes with. When the rumors of Freddy being removed sprung up years ago, I remember being excited. I would be able to play as Freddy still, I would be able to play as Quentin still, and I would never have to play Springwood again. And if that doesn't say how I feel about the map, I don't know what will. Thank you for listening till the end if you did. If you skipped to the end for some reason, the Spark notes are that Badham's the worst map ever made, and it needs to go away. But thank you for listening, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider leaving a like and a subscribe, they both help me out a lot. My name is Kuhssir, and I will see you soon.